Now, as many states rushed to redraw congressional maps ahead of the 2026 midterms, a new national poll finds half of American voters say that district lines should only be redrawn once a decade after the decennial U.S. Census. According to the Center Square Voters' Voice poll, 50% of voters, they say congressional lines should only be redrawn once every 10 years after the U.S. Census, except when required by a court. Joining us to discuss this further is the Center Square's Brett Rowland. Brett, thanks for taking time with us. A lot of data to pour through in the latest Voters' Voice poll, but we saw that half the country says, hey, only once a decade, unless by the courts. Where do the other 50% on this poll land?
That's a great question, Greg. Thanks so much for having me on. So about 33% say states should be allowed to redraw before the next census if they believe the maps are unfair or outdated. Another 17% were unsure. So you have this plurality of voters for a once in a decade standard, but about a third of voters are open to earlier redraws. The tension is really important here because about a quarter of all congressional seats have already been redrawn mid-decade after President Trump's called on states to do so before the 2026 midterm election.
When it comes to the issue of redrawing maps, I mean, we've seen this litigated across the board. This year's been pretty busy. Even, the issue of how the maps are drawn, be it for political reasons or for racial reasons, as we've seen the courts tackle in the past, including this year. But there's nothing barring them, the states, from doing these mid-decade redrawing, is there?
No, that's exactly right. They're allowed to do this. It depends. I mean, every state is different. Every state has their own election laws, so there's a lot of variation across the board. But you're right. There is absolutely nothing prohibiting them from doing it. It had sort of fallen out of favor for many years, and it was only done after the once a decade census. But this year, that's all changed. The last time we saw sort of a lot of redrawing was after the Civil War, when they were also looking for partisan advantage at that time. So it's something we haven't seen in a long time. It's definitely new. It's not unheard of, but it's something that hasn't been studied a ton.
Yeah, and it's interesting to kind of see, those of us like you and I who've been in the news business, watching how this works every 10 years. We kind of know about this, but the general public might not so much understand it. They're getting a lesson this year in it for sure. But back to this particular poll question, 50% say only once every decade after the census. You see that other breakdown. What about the breakdown across political lines, right? I mean, because the Voters' Voice poll does give you more than just the who's in favor, who's not. They give you Republican outcome, Democrat outcome, independent outcome. What does that look like?
So there's some differences here, but there's more bipartisanship than you might imagine here. But so the Republicans are split more than you might expect. 52% say they favor waiting for the census, but 40% say states should be allowed to redraw earlier. So that's essentially even. Democrats were more firmly opposed. You had 57% favor the once a decade standard, and then about 28% earlier redraws. When it gets to independents, that's where it gets a little bit more interesting. So you got 46% saying they prefer waiting, 23% say they support earlier draws, and 31% not sure. That's the highest not sure out of any of the groups we've looked at. So this isn't totally a partisan issue. A majority of Republicans still prefer waiting for the census, even as the Republican states are sort of leading this charge. Although Democrats, as we've seen, have certainly responded in kind in states where they have power.
Yeah, this issue of not sure popping up in these polls is kind of fascinating. But the poll comes as states across the country rushing to redraw those maps, as we talked about. We could go through the entire list of California, Florida, Missouri, North Carolina, Tennessee, and even more. But you've talked with some academics about all of this. What are they telling you, just in general, about the entire issue of drawing maps?
So I did. I got some great experts to weigh in on this. The first on Benjamin Schneer from Harvard Kennedy School. He said voter opposition to this is real, and that survey research has found that Americans view gerrymandering on the same footing as political corruption. They do not like this. But he said that poll opposition alone is not going to do anything to stop politicians from doing this. He said it would take something like a sustained focus and a more compelling narrative to even get close to moving the needle on this. I also talked with Kyle Kondik from the UVA Center for Politics. He said also that he doubts there are real consequences for states that have already gerrymandered. He said Democratic states will likely go to voters in 2027 to unwind the redistricting commissions and rules. And then he said that winning those battles might not be easy. Walter Olson from the Cato Institute, he said that not only is mid-cycle redistricting expensive, think about printing ballots and that kind of things. We weren't able to get a hard cost on this, but we know that the costs are out there. They're just not all in one place. He also said that the initial partisan advantages tend to disappear once the opposing power responds in kind. So you sort of see these go back and forth. And then
and you have to think too about the confusion to the voters, right? They're in one district one year, and then the next time they go, they find out, well, wait a second, I thought my representative was this person. Now it's somebody else entirely different.
Right, and that was a point that Olson really spoke about. He said that the voters don't like this, and they would rather not this happen. But the other thing is that we did see that voters really like those independent commissions. But I talked with Jason Torchinsky, who's an election law attorney. He said that those also have their drawbacks. He said redistricting is essentially complex. Public opinion shifts constantly, and that independent commissions can have some real drawbacks.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, because regardless if it's mid-decade or not, it has to be done after each decennial census. And another question on this that was asked to the Voters' Voice poll respondents dealt with whether or not you have an independent redistricting commission, or if the state legislators who are elected are drawing these things, or if it's going to have to be the courts, maybe. What did we find from that poll data, from that separate question?
So this is real interesting. About 41% trust independent commissions to draw fair congressional lines. 16% said they trust state legislatures. Another 15% said they trust courts. And here's this number: 27% said they're not sure.
But again, Brett, I mean, this not sure person keeps popping up in these polls. What do you think that's an indication of?
I think the complexity is at least part of it. Now, voters are smart. They get what's going on, especially when it comes to partisan stuff. I don't think they need to be told what to do, but these are very complex issue, and how your state or maybe even your local election commission handles these things could be different from what's happening elsewhere. So there's a lot of levels of government here involved in the election process, and a lot going on. So I think that's where some of the uncertainty is. But the big picture is that there's a more than 2-to-1 margin for commissions over having the state legislatures draw the maps themselves. And that's pretty bipartisan.
There's a lot of different ways to do that. As you said, some of your academic sources highlighting, hey, there might be some positive things, but there could also be some drawbacks or unforeseen consequences. Brett, greatly appreciate your time. Be sure to get the newsletter with the latest Voters' Voice poll information by signing up for free today at thecentersquare.com.